Hey, what's up everybody? Lawler here, your insider for all things Rocket League. We have officially wrapped up the regular season for the fall split, and the only thing that remains is the major, which isn't actually a major. It's being converted into another regional with double points, but that's besides the point. What really matters though is it makes me really sad that normally if the world was normal and COVID wasn't happening, we would technically all be preparing to go to a LAN in like 3 weeks to watch all these teams from the internationals play, which makes me kind of sad. I really wish we were at to that point, but that's enough of that. Enough sadness. Let's actually break down what went down this week. So as I mentioned, all of the regular season stuff for the fall split has officially ended, and in this past week we ended up doing the grid for North America week 9. We also had Europe for the grid week 9. Then we also finished off regional 3 for North America. So we're going to go in order of those: Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday through Sunday for the regional, one at a time. And as always, if you guys are here and you guys are enjoying the content, make sure you guys follow all the social medias in the description down below. Give the video a thumbs up. Leave me any comments with questions that you guys have. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. It is greatly appreciated. So let's kind of focus here in on North America for week number 9 of the grid. This one had some interesting moments overall. Towards the top end, usually we get Energy, Space Station, Envy, G2, some sort of combination of that, but a lot of those actually didn't end up making it into the top 8 in the first place. A lot of reason why was actually the main one being with Space Station. Before we even get into anything, and if you want, we can kind of take a look at Group A and B here in the group stage. You should notice that Space Station forfeited both of their matches. They just weren't able to field a full team. Reddles and Arsenal were moving to Florida. They're going to be in a team house for the majors, where they're trying to compete for the double points kind of bracket. So they ended up forfeiting because they were in the middle of a move. Chrome was supposed to play if they could still field it, but unfortunately Chrome and Typical is not enough to get a W, so had to forfeit those, so we didn't get to see them play. That did give a free win to Sonics as well as United, who has actually been trending in a really good direction, and you saw that in the lowers. The big difference though is that Sonics ends up qualifying without the use of Shock and have still been using Roldiz, and then United also ends up qualifying as well, which has actually been a really nice change of pace. United a week ago ended up using Tristan. He comes back again and has been making a big difference. Both Tristan and One Mike on offense has actually been a really big threat, and it's been exciting to see. I got to see it firsthand on the V1 broadcast in the playoffs, which I'll get to in just a bit here, but really, really exciting. Energy, Envy, Sonics, and United end up qualifying pretty much as expected, I would say, on the top end, but Pittsburgh Knights actually falling short against that United team, I think should open up eyes for quite a few people. And then Omelette also transitioning into a better direction. If you guys didn't notice, Omelette did end up getting picked up this week. They're now Ghost Gaming. Keep that in mind. If we jump over to Group C and D, we then got the Peeps and Version 1 qualifying. This was a big one, I think, for Version 1. They end up beating Rogue again. This is back-to-back weeks. And then they ended up playing Kansas City Pioneers, the team that has essentially had their number for weeks now. A very fast and in-your-face play style. Version 1 has put a lot of emphasis on solidifying that defense and finding ways to transition out, but then also holding on to a lead. And this one goes the distance to 5, where they end up winning ultimately and qualifying in the upper bracket. G2 got upset early as well with a 3-0 loss to T-Krell and the rest on X set, and ended up making plot twist in the lowers. I think of the past, man. They basically didn't waste any time with them and moved straight on to Kansas City Pioneers and did the exact same thing. They didn't drop a single game in those lowers, so G2 ends up qualifying through lowers. And then a big thing for Rogue as well. Rogue is a team that I've seen have issues where they get down on themselves and kind of, I don't even know if it's tilt's the right word, but they have a hard time bouncing back. But for them to drop to lowers immediately after losing to Version 1, they beat Charlotte Phoenix and Xset and end up qualifying in. So glad to see Rogue able to hold on. We then look at the playoffs as the final bracket. It is Envy versus Rogue, Energy versus G2, Peeps versus Sonics, and then V1 versus United. And this is where it gets interesting. So for those that don't know, next season in the grid, based upon standings and how everything's play out, if you are one of the top 10 teams from the grid, you automatically guarantee yourself in the winter split. And I was really happy actually to get to watch Version 1 for 2 reasons this grid. As you guys know, every week I cast the grid for Version 1. What's interesting is not only watching them develop as a team over the weeks, but in this particular week, they needed to not only perform better than United, Sonics, Omelette, and there was like an Alpine. There was 4 teams that they needed to perform better than. And if any of those other teams ended up making it into the semifinals, they would have been knocked out. They wouldn't have been top 10. They would have to fight in like a promotion relegation system in the winter split. But what ended up happening is they got the perfect bracket. They ended up playing against the other opponent in E United, the exact same team that's fighting for that number 10 spot. Going into this match, E United had it at number 10, and version 1 needed to win to knock them down and get those additional points to jump up. It ends up going all the way to 7. Really, really exciting series, and they move into the semifinals, and because of that, they end up securing a spot instead of E United. So a lot of pressure on the line. It was a really hype match, a really good weekend. They had the ability to control their own fate, and they did. So V1 is a team that I think a lot of people still consider to be a lesser team, but they continue to show better and better results week in and week out. So I'm really happy for version 1, and it was an absolute pleasure. Also, shout outs to V1 if you guys ever watched these, for allowing me to be on the broadcast. It was a great time and really entertaining, even though it hurts the heart a little bit. They ended up going up against the Peeps in the semifinals, and Peeps just were on a tear. They have a really good roster. They ran into the same exact team in the quarterfinals the week beforehand, and Peeps also made it super entertaining. Gyro just feeling confident when he needs to move in and challenge things. The Peeps are a team, if you allow them to dictate the game, they will punish you. On the other side of the bracket, Energy does end up beating G2, and Rogue ends up beating Envy, which was, for me, a big surprise, because I think Envy is a team that normally handles their playstyle quite well. Energy made quick work of Rogue, and this is the Energy that was what we considered the number 1 in my power rankings just because of their performances. They continued that, and they had multiple big wins in a row until regionals hit, which we'll talk about in a bit here. But Energy and Peeps in the grand finals. Energy just kind of made quick work with it and ended it out early. So Energy ends up winning in the grid for week 9, the final week, and the standings can be shown somewhere in here. These are the grid standings. These are your teams that are going to be in the top 10. Anything that you see on these standings are the ones you need to pay attention to, because they've automatically guaranteed a spot in the winter split, and the number 1 team automatically guarantees them a spot in the major, which will also show in those standings, which I'll show at the end of regionals. We then jump over to the EU grid, and for group A and B, it is BDS versus Vitality for a qualifying match. BDS gets the better of them there. It is then Liquid versus Oxygen. Dignitas was playing with a sub with Jesse because Violent Panda is resting his thumb with the tendonitis before the major, so he's actually been playing a lot of KBM, which has been pretty entertaining. Apparently he's like Grand Champ level KBM. It's actually what he started playing on initially, so back to the roots, I guess, for Violent Panda, but still obviously trying to keep mechanics fresh in the mind, even though he's not using the controller and trying to rest the thumb. So they ended up playing with Jesse and actually qualifying through the lowers. It's probably one of the better performing weeks that Dignitas has had, and they end up doing it with Jesse, which is hilarious. If you guys didn't get to go watch that broadcast, it was actually Violent Panda, Verge, and Leaf X as the commentators on that, and just kind of more of like a podcasty vibe. Super funny. They messed with Jesse's camera and made him do like flip resets. I don't know, it was just goofy. So make sure you guys go check that. Singularity does end up bettering Oxygen in the lowers, so your 4 teams qualifying through are BDS, Liquid, Singularity, and Dignitas. Big one for me was Liquid actually qualifying through the uppers. The fact that they only dropped 1 game to Triple Trouble is actually pretty exciting. They have been trending in a better place as of late, so glad to see them continuously moving in to top 8 and possibly top 4. If we take a look at Group C and D, the full Giants roster is back and in full form, and they do just that. They end up playing against Fadeaway and winning 3-1. Then they go up against Galaxy Racer in a really tough fought game. If you guys don't know Galaxy Racer, that's the previous Monkey squad. I end up covering their matches for week 9, and it was an exciting run, so I ended up seeing them get to that point, but ended up losing 3-2. So Giants qualify. Guild ends up putting up a pretty good fight as well. Wins over Solary and Barcelona to qualify, where Barcelona ends up beating the hot Endpoint from last week. That was a pretty good fight in general, just a really good nail biter. Endpoint to me is a team that's possibly moving up or down in those power rankings, and Barcelona tries to remain firm at my like 6th spot. So glad to see them keep that in consistency. In the lowers then, it was Barcelona that ended up beating Top Blokes, which is a pretty big surprise for me. Blokes just didn't seem like their full self in that one, so that one was a little bit off. And then Barcelona gets the win over there. And then Galaxy Racer against Endpoint, another really fun match. I was interested to see how Galaxy Racer was actually going to perform against Endpoint, because Endpoint obviously brings that playstyle with Virtuoso. And the issue I have with Endpoint is it does feel like they are super reliant on Metzenars having a really breakout game. And when he doesn't, they still look solid and competitive, but they're just not enough to push in and above. The one thing I noticed more than anything, though, is obviously because I am watching it specifically, but just as more of a broad spectrum, Galaxy Racer ends up making top 8 4 events in a row, and that includes 3 grids as well as regionals as well, making top 8. So Galaxy Racer really stepping in the right direction. Arju's edition has been solidified. They've made a grand final, a semifinal, and 2 top 8 performances. So that's a big deal for Galaxy Racer. As we take a look at the playoffs, you are seeing Guild versus Galaxy Racer, where Galaxy Racer ends up winning in 7, which was insanity. And then they go up against a Team Liquid team that just, I don't know what it is about Team Liquid. They find weird ways to win, but man, they make it awkward for other teams. And I guess that's a credit to them, because it just feels like anytime you're trying to get something going and you're starting to get into a flow, Liquid's like, yeah, but have you seen this? And we're like, no, why would you ever do that? And it makes it super weird, but they end up getting wins out of it. So they end up beating and going into the grand finals. So Liquid making a grand finals, big deal. They end up beating Singularity and Galaxy Racer to get there. On the other side of the bracket, it was BDS versus Barcelona. BDS wasted no time with Barcelona, quick 4-0, technically 3-0 because of one game advantage. And Dignitas, same thing up against Giants, where Giants is just the better team, and Dignitas ends up losing there. We then do get an exciting matchup, and normally it's been Vitality and BDS lately. But we get BDS versus Giants, and Giants ends up bettering BDS here, which was pretty surprising. Glad to see them still in that top 3 conversation, and they end up going up against Liquid, where Giants versus Liquid, if Giants loses that, something weird's going on, and they don't. 4-1 in that victory, and that wraps up the grid for Europe. If you guys haven't seen the results or don't know, again, as a reiteration, you can see all the standings somewhere here. Top 10 are the ones that are automatically guaranteed for the winter split. Last but not least, we did get into Regional 3 for North America, the last and final one of this split. 32 teams, as always, breaking it down into the top 8. If you take a look at Group A, B, and Stage 2, so A and B obviously is 16 and 16. In Group A, you had Energy, G2, Peeps, Rogue, Xset, United, Team Frontline, and BOSF Esports make it through. BOSF is the previous Jamal Jabari squad, so they end up qualifying here. In Group B, you've got Envy, Plot Twist, Ghost Gaming, which used to be Omelet, as I mentioned earlier, Space Station Gaming, Kansas City Pioneers, Stromboli, which is a new roster now that they're bringing in Stokely and the rest, Alpine Esports, and Zero Issue. If you guys don't know, Zero Issue used to be Infinite Shots that just got recently picked up, a Mexican-based squad. We then go into Stage 2, where we're taking the top 8 of both A and B and giving us our final 16, and the 8 that end up moving through, G2, Space Station, Rogue, Energy, Envy, Kansas City Pioneers, United, and Peeps. Pretty much as expected. I think these are the teams that are going to be getting better moving forward. A lot of people are surprised actually with United winning out over something like Alpine, and maybe like Xset with T. Corral, but Xset had a really rough situation. I mean, they had to go up against Space Station and then Kansas City Pioneers. Their winnable match that they ended up getting was Zero Issues. And then they go up against Alpine too. Like they went through the gauntlet. Same thing with Stromboli. Stromboli's playing G2, Peeps, and Ghost. Like there was some tough matches in top 16. We then get into the playoffs, which is our top 8. We got G2 versus Peeps, Energy versus Envy, again, Space Station versus United, and then Rogue versus Kansas City Pioneers. We're gonna go top bottom. Even though it's the opposite order. These air actually from the bottom match and work their way up because they want the number 1 seed to get the main spotlight roughly 3 hours into the broadcast. So G2 versus Peeps. These are best of 5s in the quarterfinals. G2 ended up beating Peeps. At this point, the only thing you really need to show is JNaps taking a nap and saying sleeping on the Peeps. That was a funny tweet that was put out. But G2 just looked like the better team here. Peeps is a playstyle that once it gets going I think is really difficult, but G2's playstyle I think really benefits them here because they are so aggressive and so much so on the offensive side. Peeps are never really able to break out of their own half and kind of work in that really aggressive bump demo heavy play that creates opportunities. So G2 does a really good job of just overwhelming with offense. Envy versus Energy, this was the match where you saw Envy being like, okay, this is a defense versus an offense. Energy and Envy play a lot, and in this one Envy just looked like the better team. Their defense was absolutely stellar, but what really sold it for me is they transitioned that into the midfield and just did not let people breathe. Not only can they handle the really crazy pressure, and a lot of people just seem to be inaccurate this weekend. It was kind of weird, but Envy still found a way to transition out and really punish. Atomic had a wonderful day, but this is where Mist really started to hit his stride too. Atomic and Mist just looked phenomenal, and Turbo honestly wasn't afraid to move up onto offense either. So there's games and moments in tournaments when you recognize a team being like, this team looks like they're going to win the whole thing today. They don't look like they're going to be stopped. I will say Energy didn't play to the level that they normally do or what's been getting them wins as of late, like in the grid, but Envy looked really good in this quarterfinal, and you kind of just had a feeling that they were going to win on through, and it did make me excited for the semifinal, which we'll talk about in a bit. Space Station just ended up overwhelming United. Space Station's been kind of hot and cold, but in this game they just looked like the better team. And then Kansas City Pioneers, same thing against Rogue. Kansas City Pioneers just overwhelmed the Rogue, but in a weird fashion. Game 1 was Rogue up 2-0. Kansas City Pioneers tied up at 0 seconds, brings it into OT, and then Rogue loses in OT. And I'm watching this on my stream, and I'm just like, this game's over. It's done. Like, they're tilted. It's done. after losing that OT. And I even specifically mentioned, like, Corrupted G is going to have his hands full because he's got to find a way to level head these guys after they gave up that win. And it just, from there, did not matter. So Kansas City Pioneers end up winning 3-0. We go into the semifinals. It is G2 versus Envy. I always really enjoy this match because it is basically really, really good offense against a really good defense. And Envy, since not only were they doing the really good defense, but also the really good offense, they end up just beating G2 and moving to the grand finals. And then it brought me to the next one, Kansas City Pioneers versus Space Station. This was a back and forth fight. It is 4-2 in favor of Kansas City Pioneers, but you're looking at 4 overtimes, and every game was a 1-goal game except for game 4, which was 2-0 in favor of Space Station. So this was a really good match. Kansas City Pioneers, I think more than anything in this day, was finally getting people to recognize that they are a team that should be in consideration of top 4, top 5. They have been fighting tooth and nail every single week to make top 8, semifinals, now grand final. Again, because they also made it in the grid as well to the grand finals a week or 2 ago, and have been continuously performing, and Beast Mode just keeps getting better. Rapid's rotations were really weird on this day. Like, he just would not rotate. He would just keep roaming with the player, and I think that's part of the reason what makes him dangerous is eventually Rapid is kind of just a roamer and he fits into his spot and they go and punish. But yeah, it was weird to watch. But again, they put a lot of pressure because of it. They pair it with a lot of demos. They open up the net because of it. A lot of double demos that came out. But they ended up beating Space Station, which was pretty surprising. But 4 OTs, it was a battle. We then move on to the grand finals, and the entire analyst desk predicts Kansas City Pioneers. And I don't know if it's because of the recency bias and what they just saw over Space Station. But Envy again. Envy is a team I think that is built structurally to handle teams like Kansas City Pioneers, that over aggression in your face all the time. Envy does a really good job of handling that, counterattacking, and punishing. And I think that just has to do positional play. They rotate so clean and always have the ability to, I think, find a player in space, or they know exactly where to place it to the side of the field. And this one was exciting. It comes down to the wire in game 7 as well. 0 seconds buzzer beater. I think it was Atomic that had a really good pass where he ends up getting underneath it and popping up high for Mist, who put a shot in. But easily the best series of the day, and I'm glad we ended up watching the grand finals live throughout on the stream. But 2 OTs in this one, back and forth the whole time. But the entire analyst desk was like, yep, it's Kansas City Pioneers. And I'm sitting in my chat, I'm like, nah, man, like Envy. I basically kind of like orchestrated this whole thing to my chat. It was kind of weird. I said that Kansas City Pioneers was going to come out hot out of the gate because that's what they do. And if they score early on the kickoff, they're a tough one to beat. They miss a lot of shots early on, and Envy ends up bringing it the other way and get a goal. And then I'm like, yep, it's 1-0. It's over. And it's really interesting to see Envy's playstyle, where when they get a lead, they are almost impossible to beat. So again, Envy's a really solid team. When they're playing like this, they're one of the best in North America, let alone the world. And it makes me excited to see how things are going to move forward, because these are the types of teams that I want to see how they perform on LAN. If it's realistic to consider they can play this style as well on LAN, but Envy is a team that is built, in my opinion, to win world championships. They look so good, and this playstyle I think is something that they can replicate in a live environment. But it was a good series. Kansas City Pioneers is turning heads, and I'm glad, because again, I'll admit it, I made some bold statements at the very beginning of this split and said, yep, it won't happen. And then they changed me and made me eat my words, which I respect. There's not many things as an analyst that you love to say more than just like, yep, I was wrong, and you guys proved me wrong. That's awesome. And Kansas City Pioneers is hopefully, for a lot of people after the flight situation, doing that to others as well. So really exciting stuff here. But again, it just makes me sad. I wish we were getting ready to go to a LAN in a couple weeks here, but unfortunately with COVID, that's not the case. That is going to wrap it up for me for this video, you guys. Content moving forward is going to be a little bit weird while we have some downtime in between the majors and the regionals and all that kind of stuff. So if you guys do have any questions, comments, concerns about what's up next, or things that you guys would like to see, let me know in the comments down below. And while you're down there, make sure you guys give it a like, as well as hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We'll catch you next time. Peace.